this shows what the housing market is really about. It's a Ponzi scheme that will leave you in debt slavery. So let's take a look and see what is going on right now. It is going to blow your mind because, well, it's not going to blow your mind actually, because I know subscribers to this channel know what is really going on out there. Nearly half, or 47%, said they are concerned about being able to qualify for their mortgage. And 16% say they are very concerned. And that was the latest results of a poll that came out. And it was basically showing how worried people were about the mortgage crisis that we're having right now, which is, in essence, mortgage rates have shot up. There are people renewing and nobody can afford it. Nobody can afford it. And if you look at this, I mean, this puts it in a totally different way. It says Canadians with fixed rate mortgages are terrified in face of higher interest rates upon renewal. So that kind of just tells you what is going on now, which is just madness. So we've got all these people that are renewing from 2018 this year, and they are looking at substantially higher rates than in 2018. You know, rates were a lot lower then. You're talking about 2.5%, 2.75%, and now they're looking at best at like 4.7%, 4.8%, depending on the type of mortgage they had. So huge increases these people are seeing. So at the same time, RBC's housing affordability measure shows that 62% of Canadians' income is required to cover the costs of home ownership, which is at the worst level on record. Doesn't that just kind of sum up what debt slavery is really about, which is paying just this massive amount of your income to service your debts? And we are really seeing that play out because, as we know, household debt in Canada is absolutely sky high, and so is private debt that businesses are holding on to. And then it doesn't just stop there. Nearly 1/3, or 29%, said they are considering alternatives. That includes 12% who are asking family and friends for money, and 11% who are considering private lenders. The latter includes significantly higher interest rates and are not regulated and are often intended to be used for shorter term loans. So we're seeing people get pushed further and further out on the risk curve because essentially they might not even be able to qualify for their renewal. And the thing is, if they're renewing with the same company, it doesn't really matter because according to this thing, which I read, basically, when you renew, you don't have to requalify. At least that's what this thing is saying. So if that's true, you could have a lot of mortgages that are renewing, for example, at Scotiabank, and those people are now paying 60 to 70% of their income towards that mortgage, and they are completely subprime. Any loss of income is just going to be a total disaster for them. But they're just on the bank's balance sheet as a normal mortgage, which is AAA rated. You know, it's just a total disaster waiting to happen. Essentially, the foundation of this house of cards is just cracking and cracking and cracking. And when the earthquake comes along, which is going to be the high unemployment, it is just going to completely collapse this deck of cards, this housing Ponzi. So it's just unbelievable. And then if you look at this as well, obviously we know that unemployment is actually really low right now. And we're already seeing the stress this high. I mean, you have to think about all those people doing second jobs and doing whatever it takes so they can pay their mortgage. What happens when the economy can't support that anymore? Those people are just dead in the water, essentially. They're screwed. And here is one of those stories, in fact. Let's pull it up. And it's just kind of sad in a way. But you have to wonder how these people even qualify in the first instance. This guy has been working an 80-hour week at 2 full-time jobs just to pay his mortgage. So the economy is supporting that right now. But what happens when the economy can't support that anymore? Well, guess what? He's screwed. He's really screwed. And, you know, this goes for not just him, but a lot of people, especially those who've committed mortgage fraud, which I just believe is a massive amount. And I've got a video that's coming on mortgage fraud and will be released on Sunday. So stay tuned for that video, because it's just going to blow your mind, some of the data points that we have when it comes to mortgage fraud, on just how prevalent the mortgage fraud really is, which I think we actually know it's really prevalent. We know it's too common. So essentially, we've got that happening. And then another thing which is really interesting, the spring housing market could bring a reckoning for realtors in Canada. So could this be why we're seeing so much cheerleading right now? Because when you look at this, real estate memberships have risen 17% to 160,000, which is just insane since March 2020. So that is really, really crazy. So a lot of new people have come into the real estate industry, and they'll be desperate for sales. So they'll be doing whatever they can to sell that house, because at the end of the day, they have a mortgage to pay. And this is what kind of creates that moral hazard that you have in place, because the realtors, they don't really have much risk. If you buy a home and end up losing it, they're not going to pay any price for that. So they're really protected in that way, and they are just a moral hazard in that respect. And unfortunately, a lot of realtors are new to the industry, inexperienced, and are just going to be desperate to get that sale. And that just goes to show how it's a bubble when you've got the amount of new realtors spiking into the industry that much, because of this housing cash cow. Anybody can get in and sell a house when there's so much FOMO, but when the market really hits a down spiral, can anybody sell a house then? No, of course not. So people start leaving the industry, and that's basically what this article is telling you about. So it's really, really insane. And the household balance sheet, it's not in a good place. You've had interest rates spike, and we know household debt is extremely high in Canada. We know private debt is extremely high, which is one of the key things, because this is what's going to lead to the unemployment. Private debt is one of the highest in the world in Canada, over 300% of GDP, private debt. So it's just mad when you really think about those numbers. And then you have to think about it, even if you're a public company or you're just a small business, if your debt has gone up in cost substantially and all your other costs are rising, you have to look in ways to save money. And unfortunately, the last thing that people look to is unemployment, is letting people go. The layoffs are already happening. We're seeing them at Walmart. We're seeing them at Amazon. We're seeing them at many different places. It's just people aren't really alert to what's going on. And Amazon is a great bellwether for the economy. So we know things are not good right now, and they're only going to get worse as the impact of these rate hikes is felt more and more as time goes on, because all this debt, it doesn't renew every time the Bank of Canada hikes interest rates. It takes time for that debt to renew, just like people who have that 5-year mortgage and they take time to get to their renewal. Well, it's the same when it comes to private debt, which is held by businesses. And this is like 3 times as high as it was in 2008. So it's a totally different situation to in 2008 when private debt wasn't that high. It's absolutely exploded since then. So this presents a huge problem, because you can see unemployment go up massively. You can see lots of companies go bankrupt, and it doesn't mean good things for the economy. And another thing that I want to show you when it comes to the household balance sheet, average weekly earnings. Well, we saw them spike during 2020 because of all the stimulus money and the UBI or shadow UBI that the government was putting out. And then it came all the way down, nearly went negative after they stopped all those supports. And now it's back to where it's historically been. And we know the personal savings rate is also crashing essentially. It's not at the lows. It's still high when you look at the last 10, 20 years. But if you zoom out even further than that, then it is really low right now. And it's only going to get lower. And we know things are bad for the average Joe and Jane, because if you look at credit card debt, that is increasing rapidly. So we know things are just really, really bad right now. It's just people aren't looking at it. They aren't willing to accept it. And they're in denial, which is why you have the denial phase of the bubble. It is exactly where we are right now. And the soft landing, no landing scenario, I'm sure, is just going to be coming out as we go on. And then you've had inflation, which has just absolutely ripped apart the household balance sheet. And the last domino to fall is really this unemployment one. And that is the one that we've got to keep an eye on. And even though this metric is really messed up and it's not entirely accurate anymore, we do know that it has some degree of accuracy, just like the GDP numbers. So we can look at this number, we can follow it to see what happens, and it's going to be very, very interesting moving forward throughout this year to see what happens. My prediction is unemployment is going to be a lot higher by the end of the year compared to where it is right now. And we're already seeing unemployment rise in certain areas. I mean, look at Alberta, for instance, unemployment consistently rising since June last year, because you've got a lot of companies in Alberta that have gone through recession after recession, accumulating more and more debt, so they're even more exposed. And the stimulus money, because so much stimulus money came in during 2020 and 2021, you saw the economy in Alberta get the most distorted out of all economies. And it's still distorted now. I mean, the government is still doing stimulus. They're still sending out stimulus checks. It's just unbelievable. So distorted, yes, 100%. And now I wanted to show you this because the people who bought in 2018 and are renewing this year, they bought around 155 on the index here. And this is real prices, but you can see how this thing has come way down. It was at 199, it's now at 163. So, you know, it could easily come back down to these 2018 levels within a very, very quick fashion, especially if that unemployment rate is going high. You've got inventory spiking dramatically because there's a lot of people that are screwed and they need to sell right now. And it's going to create a lot of chaos, a lot of fear. And that is exactly when you want to be a buyer, when you can get in there and bid really low on houses, because people are going to have to take that offer, do a short sale on the house and go to the bank and say, this is what I can get to it. Will you let me out of this? And they probably will. And, you know, the negative amortizations, all that kind of stuff, it's just creating a disaster for the future, because this is just more cracks in that foundation. It's not a good thing. Even though it seems like a good thing, it's not a good thing at all. The only thing it is bullish for is a banking crisis, which is not good at all, because essentially you're allowing more and more of your mortgages to go subprime, because you're just digging those people further and further deeper into that hole that they're not going to be able to climb out of. So it's an absolute disaster. So anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, you might like either of these videos. I'm so sorry about the audio issues. I have no idea what's happened. I don't even know if this video is going to be good or not until I play it back. But I want to thank you for bearing with me, and I'm sorry for all those issues.